Okay, I'm going to be giving a brief tutorial on how to use the screen effect shader for dope shader. So I'm going to run you through the main settings real quick. To start, you don't have to enable this for particles if you're using them. It can be off or on. I use off personally. I don't think it matters too much. I'm sure there's some technicalities that I don't know there. This is all just my knowledge so far. So your fade start and end here, this is going to dictate kind of how you present your shader. So I set mine to 1 to 100. That means anybody within this range will be able to see your screen effect. If it is at 2 and 5, you'll need to be about this distance from your AVI in order to see it, and that's typically not the desired effect. So I go ahead and set mine to 1 to 100. Another option would be 1 to 50 if you want to keep it in a more controlled area. After that, these are primarily different scripts and audio links you can use and play with. I have not personally used them, so I'm not going to touch on them. However, this render queue, if you're using over rendering, switch this to on and adjust as needed. Otherwise, keep it off and it'll do everything you need for you. Now, down to the post-processing, which is all of the fancy, all the flashy, everything you're going to want to play with is right here. The most of these are going to be self-explanatory to their names, so I might sound like a broken record. Feel free to skip forward if you need to. Be sure that you enable anything before you start it, and the effects might be kind of crazy when you start, so understand you're likely going to need to adjust. So shaking, you can slide these and make it a much less dramatic effect, and you can also control how far it can go on the x-axis and on the y-axis, which is a really useful and fun thing to play with. The frequency will control kind of how much shake it gives. I don't really play with these too much, but it can give different effects. And the roundness is just kind of how often it happens. If you have it at 100, it's not going to move, and if you have it at 0, it's going to move a lot. So make sure that is off. The moves, this is how you're going to control your screen. When this is on, you can tell it if it wants to be to the left, if it wants to be up. You can control that based off of what you want to do with it on each thing. The rotator is something that is best just played with. When you enable this, it's going to go like this and look kind of all crazy. The amplitude is the frequency, as many other things do, and you can just kind of play with this at will and control how slow, how tilted, whatever effect you want. Can be some pretty cool stuff going on in here. And yeah, just go and have a field day on that. Zoom is very self-explanatory. You have simple and you have centering. Simple gives, if you look anywhere, it's going to zoom in wherever you're looking. Centering is it's going to pull the vision to you no matter what. The center of the screen is going to be the focus. Fisheye effect is very self-explanatory. If you zoom in, if you zoom out, it's going to give you some different effects. The roundness is the fisheye itself, so this is more of a like bulbous look when you turn that off. I prefer it on personally. In Kaleidoscope, you can have a lot of fun with. Turn it on to KIFs, and then slide this up, and have your fun. These will do different things. It's a bit laggy sometimes because this is a very intensive effect from what I've learned. You can also control colors, so if you want this to be like reddish, there you go. And you can control how much of that shows. So now I'm going to do that. You can make a move. You can do all types of stuff. You can make some pretty awesome effects. Switch that off. Okay. Alright, the shockwave is going to give you kind of a pulsing effect. You can do centering, so it's going to pulse from the outside, or you can do screen, which is going to give you an all-around, just like, bump. These will kind of mess with how that looks, so feel free to play with as you want. I'm going to explain a little less as we go down, that way it's not taking too long. Pixelation, you can play with these to get different looks of your pixelation. The value is how much pixelated you want it to be. That's a very fun thing to play with. Swirl is very self-explanatory. The radius is going to be how much it affects, and then the angle, the speed, if you want it to flow. If you don't want it to flow, keep that set at 0. And speed tile is how, like, if you want this to be up, it'll give it a much more vibrant effect. Okay, on next is waves. It's very similar to the swirl. I recommend playing with it. I'm not going to go into explanation due to the similarity. Stretching is going to distort your string length or height, so you can play with that to get some really fun effects. Next would be the compression, which is the opposite of stretching, so feel free to play with that in the same way. The sharp distortion is something you can do enable or static. Static's a really fun effect, I personally think. Like this, you can make some very trippy, interesting things happen. So have fun doing that. The next thing we're going to talk about is the distortion. This is going to just give you kind of an odd look to your screen. So it's not too much colored, it's just going to, yeah, like you're underwater almost. I love playing with this. Glitching is very self-explanatory, just play with it. You can switch it to RGB if you want to get the effects of like colors going on, and you can control the block size, the shakes, and everything. Default's just going to give you a standard glitch, no color, and then grayscale is going to glitch out grayscale, obviously. So I'm going to keep that off for now and move on to cutting. This is going to slice your screen, which is a lot of fun. So you can go like this, and now you're going to control the offset. So this is going to tell it how much you want it to slide. You can tell it how many cuts you want it to make, or like what your total is, the difference. It's kind of like your offset. You can play with these to make them further apart, and you can play with this to make it do whatever you want. Okay, going on to the RGB options. This is so much fun to play with, and you can get so many different effects just by fooling around. You're gonna mess with these to offset your colors. So as you can see, that kind of like, it makes things look a little blurry. It's not a very dramatic effect unless you want it to be. And you can control the reds, the blues, and anything in between with the correct settings. That is something best played with to learn. Blur is also very self-explanatory. You have a few options here, which I'll explain. Your radial is going to be very like center focused. So as you can see, if you look at my face, it's not very like blurred, but the crown, meanwhile, is almost unrecognizable. Samples are going to increase your frames the lower they are, and decrease your frames the higher it is. And yeah, here it actually gives a warning. So I recommend to keep this somewhere around like the 30s to 50s for like both a good effect and like high quality. But I wouldn't recommend going too high above that, otherwise you're going to experience some frame loss, and using these types of effects, you really want to go for optimization. Displacement's going to be kind of how much blur you want. Something you can play with. When you go into circular, it's going to give you a very pretty effect, I personally think. It makes things that are shiny really shine. Horizontal is very self-explanatory. Lens is going to give you these little circles as well, which I personally adore. I think it is one of the prettiest settings. And then default is just your standard blur. So I'm going to keep this off for now. Edge glow. This is a very popular effect. As you can see, it's just going to make everything kind of outlined in whatever color you want. You can choose the color based off of your own needs and whatever you want to present. I'm going to hover in like a pink because that is my personal favorite. The power is going to be kind of like the strength of it. You can control like the vibrancy if you want. The offset will tell it how far from the like objects it should be. So that is very vibrant, and that is not. I'm going to keep mine here. Background grayscale, self-explanatory. You can make everything else grayscaled while your edge glow pops still, and you can also control the background color. So if you want it to be dark, you can make it dark. If you want it to be like blue and pink, you can do blue and pink. This creates some of the like prettiest effects I personally have seen in VR. Something very fun to play with. Other options here, the masking values. This stuff's like not really anything I play with personally, but that's a bit of a vignette. So if you want to have a vignette effect, you can play with that and on and off. It'll depend on how much you want to mask. I don't play with the screen UV either. If you want to find out what that does, have fun. The blur noise is going to make it shake. It's going to be staticky. That's a lot of fun. And now you can do the hues, which is going to make it kind of RGB. You can do the fish eyes, shakes, move, and etc., which is a lot of fun to play with overall. I'm going to go ahead and set this back to white. Okay. Now the rays is something you can play with that is going to go with other things. So edge glow and blur base. So this will make your settings jump to other areas. So kind of here, this is going to put this down here now. So just be careful if this disappears once you enable this. Don't panic, it's right down here. All the same settings. It just makes it look a little bit different, and it is a little heavier on the frames, I think, personally, though I do not know that. And if it is blur based, then it will do the same thing for your blur, wherever that is. Here you go. It'll make things look a little bit different when you turn them on. As you can see, it makes it ray-like. Very pretty effect. If you're going for something like ethereal, I highly recommend this setting. I'm going to go ahead and switch those off for now, but just don't panic if things look different when you enable that option. They are still there, I promise, and just disable it if you want it to look normal again. The fog is not something I personally play with. It requires depth light, and that is just really frame intensive. If you want to play with that, have fun. I'm sure it creates some awesome effects. The hue is very self-explanatory. This is just going to be changing your colors on screen. You can mess with these on how much you want it to show. The color selection is kind of like an RGB, but it's going to start gray. And now you're selecting what colors you want to show through. So as it is naturally blue, it's going to show anything with a hue of blue. However, if I move this radial to like red, anything natural toned of like reds are going to show up. Meanwhile, green, and etc. So you can exclude colors all except for particular ones with this setting, and you can also limit how much you want to be able to show, rather it's specific or very lenient, the saturation range, and etc. So definitely something to check out. Color grading. This is something that is really fun to play with. This is going to mix your settings, kind of. You can control your brightness a lot with this. This is going to be your main settings. So if you want it to be flashbang, if you want it to be dark, I recommend color grading, absolutely. It is so easy to use, so fun to play with, and you can do so much with it. Down here is your transition colors. So if you want something like that, and you want this to be like blue, and you want to get like a really pretty like gradient to it, you're just going to go like that, slide that through, and you've got that effect. So I'm going to set these both to white for the sake of the tutorial right now. And now these, HDR, these do exactly as you would expect them to do. So have a lot of fun with that. Contrast, saturation, and invert. This is applying to what everybody is seeing, what you're seeing, and boldly at that. So contrast is going to make absolutely everything follow these settings, along with the saturation, and if you choose to, invert. Beware with the invert, it is very bright in game. Like, this will hurt your eyes, so take that easily. The screen space texture. Now this is how you'll go ahead and put really things on your screen. So if you see screen overlays, this is typically how they do it. I try to just do mine on typical enable. However, if you are playing with over rendering, as I showed you could do before, then you'd want to use this setting just to kind of make sure everything flows smoother. You can control the colors you want things to be tinted, and then you can choose what you want to show up. So I'll just click this matte cap and you'll obviously see anywhere you look, it's there. This slides how vibrant that is, so you can make it disappear, you can make it right in your face, you can make it blurry, you can make it focused. This is going to be what it looks like, so play with these different settings depending on what you want. Clamp I typically use for mine if I just want something on the screen, and then you'll adjust this as needed, or if it's just a standard scale, then you can do that all together. You can change the positions of it accordingly and just have a lot of fun playing with all these different settings. I'm sure you can figure that out on your own. Okay, so next we're gonna go on to the speed effect, and this one does kind of really cheesy anime style, which I personally love. I have used this in a couple of my goofier performances and got some amazing crowd reactions. So that is definitely something to play with. You can change how much it wants to outline. You can change how vibrant that is. You can change the color, the fade, and everything. That is so fun to mess around with, and a really goofy thing to have on screen, I think. But if you can do it right, it's a great effect. Along with this film grain. If you're going for something more old-fashioned, old-timesy, something like this is perfect. I love to use this for like flashbacks or like anything of that sort. Very dramatic. And as expected with the other things, the alpha you can slide, you can change the colors. These are all different things to just kind of play with. You can change if you want them to be straight, wavy, how fast you want them to go, and everything. So definitely a very fun effect there. Noise is going to give you a kind of distortion. You can do this like a gray, and you can control how much you want it to be. So it's very staticky, as you can see. The contrast is just going to be how like vibrant, I guess, it is. And then you can change this, obviously, color if you want to. The noise blinking I have not personally used, so I don't know how bad or good that looks in VR. I personally just do off and on. RGB is going to be exactly as you expect it to be. This kind of looks like a TV, I think. So you could do some really fun things with that. Vignette, this is a very self-explanatory and very universal thing. It is the simple in and out, as I mentioned before with the colors. The smoothness will adjust kind of like what that is going to look like for you, as you can see the difference here. The roundness is just going to be if you want it to be a circle versus like an eye shape, and then with the roundness you can control if you want it to be a square or a circle. Vignette blinking does exactly as you think it would. This makes a very cool effect if you want to make a blinking eyes effect. I'd recommend opening them up a little bit and doing something like this, or however else you feel like incorporating it. You can change the colors as well on that. Bars is just going to put some bars on your screen, so you can control kind of how much of that you want, how little or big you want them to be, and then if you want to zoom in, zoom out. This makes a really great combination with the raise option. It can give you some very ethereal looking effects if used correctly, and of course you can choose any different colors you'd like, or you can do a texture, which I personally have not used. However, it kind of works, I'd assume, as this does. I'm going to change this to white, and you'll now see this. The blur is kind of the same thing, so you can make some very, very interesting effects with this for sure. I'm going to turn that to off for now. And then the lines is just like the bars, but they're going to be moving now and they're not so adjusting. You can change how dark they are, how light they are, how many there are, how fast they are, and etc. That is something to definitely play with. And last but not least, we have dither, which when turned on, for example onto multiply or additive, here we go, is going to look something like this. It's very bright. I do not personally recommend this for VR because of that. You can put it to step for a little less, and then you can adjust these accordingly. This could make some very interesting effects if you want to do like almost a video game type, I think would be really cool. Personally, I don't use this, but I think this would look amazing when used correctly. So have some fun with that, and I really look forward to seeing what anybody creates with this. I think screen shaders are one of the funnest things ever. I did not explain how to put this onto a sphere, but it is the same as the Leviance shader, which I have covered before on my channel, so feel free to check that out if you are new to shaders. And I hope this was a nice tutorial. If you have any questions, please comment and let me know, or anybody can shoot me a DM on Discord. And if you have any requests for tutorials, let me know. I love to kind of share what I know and see where everybody else takes it, because it is just amazing to watch and so much fun to play with. So have a wonderful day, and I hope you enjoyed the video.